We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Amud Aleph and Mesechet Kesuvos Daf 40a. The Gemara here continues, if we're learning onus from Mefata and vice versa, so Laha Milsa Nami Ligmuru Mehadadi, why don't we learn for this issue as well? We should learn one from the other. Rashi over here explains, Laha Milsa Shiyeh Mefata Nosi Al Karcha, we should force the Mefata, the person who seduces, we should force him to marry the woman, just like we do by onus. Why don't we say that? And to that, the Gemara says, Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, Mohor Yimhoreno Lo Leisha, Lo Midaito. It says in the Pasuk, Lo, to him for a wife, and we understand that to mean lo means midaito, it means with his will. We don't force him to marry her, but again, it is something that he does willingly. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Keitzad shosa ba'atzitzo v'chulu. How is it that he drinks from his vessel? Meaning, in what situations do we force it, and in what situations do we not? And the Mishnah went on to say that in situations where she's not fit to marry into the community, for example, a mamzera, so then we do not force them to get married by the situation of onus. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Kahana says, Amriso lishmaita kamei de Rav Zavid min Nahardoi. I said this over in front of Rav Zavid from Nahardoi, and I said the following question, Nesi asay, v'nidchalo asay. Why doesn't the asay, which says that they should get married, that he has to marry her, why doesn't that come and push off the los asay? Let's say she's a mamzeris and she's not allowed to marry into the community. Why don't we say asay docha los asay? And the Gemara continues, Amar li, he said to me, Heicha amrino nesi asay v'nidchi los asay. When do we say that the asay pushes off the los asay? Kagon mila b'tzaras. For example, let's say a person has to do the mitzvah of bris mila, and there's a tzaras over there which is going to be cut off when the person does the bris mila. Now normally you're not allowed to remove tzaras from the body, but in this situation you have asay docha los asay. And why do we say that? To lo efshar l'kiyumei le'asay, because there's no other way to fulfill the asay without pushing off the los asay. Then we say asay docha los asay. But over here, if she would say she doesn't want to marry him, so mi'isa l'asay klal, does the asay exist at all? It doesn't exist at all in such a situation. There are situations where there is no need, or there is no even, you're not even supposed to fulfill the mitzvah asay, and therefore in this situation we do not say asay docha los asay. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Yisomosh and Isarsav and Iskarsha. Let's say you have a situation of an orphan, and she was betrothed and then divorced. Rabbi Elazar says, ha'ones chayiv. If somebody rapes her, so then he's chayiv to pay the fine. V'hamefate pater. But if somebody seduces her, he is pater from paying the fine. Rashi over here explains, Yisomosh and Isarsav and Iskarsha, ones chayiv hamefate pater. Dekevon di Yisomohi, since she is an orphan, ukanas shaloi, and she's the one that collects the money, she's the one that takes the money for the kanas. V'achilte, and then she's really, what she's done over here, if it's a case of seduction, she really has forgiven it. To me, dait and ispatitalo, because again, she was in a case of seduction, it's considered willingly, so pater, so therefore he's pater from paying the fine in such a situation. Over Gemara Mefarish, now the Gemara will explain in Isarzav and Isgarsha that it says in the Mishnah she was an orphan who was betrothed and divorced. What do we need betrothed and divorced for? Just say buy an orphan. In a situation of rape, he has to pay. In a situation of seduction, so there she forgave it, so to speak, so he does not have to pay. What's the difference that she was betrothed and divorced? So the Gemara will explain milsa achrisi. That's a different statement. It's not going on the case of orphan. It's a separate thing. Let's say you have a situation of a woman who's betrothed and divorced. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabba bar Barchan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Barchan says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elazar in our Mishnah, Beshitas Rabbi Akiva Rabbo Amr. He's really following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who was his Rebbe. The Amr, because Rabbi Akiva said, Yesh la knas, ukanasa liatzme, says that she does receive the knas, and the knas goes to her. Rashi over here says, Beshitas Rabbi Akiva Rabbo Amra, the Amr b'masnis, and we said in the Mishnah, this was earlier, Narush and Isarsav and Iskarsha, let's say you have a Nara who's betrothed and divorced, Kinasa liatzma, we had a machlokas over there, what happens? And Rabbi Akiva said that the knas goes to her. V'hach Isarsav and Iskarsha, the Rebbe Elazar, and so therefore we're understanding the Mishnah that when it says she was betrothed and divorced, of Rebbe Elazar's case, Kisha Avia Kayim, the case is her father is still alive, V'kari la Yisoma, but we're referring to her in the Mishnah as a Yisoma, Misham depaka zechus avmina, because the merit of the father, the fact that the father has authority over her is no longer. Lagabe kanasu, in terms of the kanas. In other words, they're understanding that the case of the Mishnah is just simply a case of nisarsa v'niskarsha, and Rabbi Elazar is following the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. And again, Rabbi Akiva said that in such a situation of ones, she does receive the kanas, and the kanas goes to her. That's exactly what Rabbi Elazar is saying, like Rabbi Akiva earlier. And the Gemara continues, Mimai, how do we know that? Rashi says, Mimai dech Rabbi Akiva svirale. How do we know that Rabbi Elazar holds like Rabbi Akiva? Midakatani, because what does it say in our Mishnah over here? It says, Yesoma, when it comes to an orphan, Rabbi Elazar Omer ha'ones chayiv ha'mefata pater. Rabbi Elazar says, the case of ones is chayiv, and the case of mefata is pater. And Rashi over here says, "Mi the katani ones chayiv umefata pater alma yesh la knas." So you see that there is a knas that goes to her. Uli atzman, she gets it. Hilkach mefata pater. That therefore by mefata he's pater. Demi daita avad, because again she did it willingly. V'ones chayiv, but ones is going to be chayiv. There is a knas that's paid to her. V'afilu avia kayim, and they understand that this means even if her father's alive, this is true. The iyasoma kidakatani. If we're talking about an actual orphan, pshita de mefata pater, then it's obvious that a mefata is pater. Obviously, the chiddush over here is Yisoma would be too obvious. The chiddush is, even in a situation when the father was alive, by Sarsav and Iskarsha, this is going to be the halacha. Again, Midiktani Yisoma, Rebbe Lazar Omer Ha'onas Chayiv HaMefata Pater, Yisoma Pshita. Yisoma, it's obvious, like Rashi said, this is obvious that is the case. Eloha Kamashmon, obviously what the Mishnah means is as follows. The Narush and Isarsav and Iskarsha, if you have a young girl who's betrothed and divorced, Ki Yisoma, she has the same status as the Yisoma, meaning to say she's not under the authority of her father, she's considered independent. Ma Yisoma liatzma, just like the Yisoma is considered independent and the payment goes to her. Af narash and esarsav and garsha liatzma, so too by a narash and esarsav and garsha, it goes to her. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zeir, Amar Rava bar Shila, Amar Rav Hamnuna Saba, Amar Rav Ada bar Rava, Amar Rav. Rav Zeir says that Rava bar Shila says that Rav Hamnuna Saba says that Rav Ada bar Rava says in the name of Rav, halacha ke Rebbe Lazar. The halacha is like Rebbe Lazar. Kari Rava led Rebbe Lazar, and Rav would say about Rebbe Lazar, to vina de chakimi, that he was the happiest of the sages, the idea being that Rav understood that the halacha often follows Rebbe Lazar. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Eizehu Boshes, what is Boshes? Hakol lefi hamevayesh v'hamisbayesh. The payment all goes according to the one who caused the embarrassment and according to the one who was embarrassed. Rashi over here says, Hakol lefi hamevayesh adam beinoni. If an average person hamevayesh, he causes embarrassment to someone else, Boshto kasha, that's a much higher level of embarrassment, me'adam zolal u'me'adam chashav. Then if it would be somebody who was a very lowly person who caused the embarrassment, that would not be as big a deal. Or if it was a very important person who caused the embarrassment, that would not be as big a deal as well. And it also goes by the person who's being embarrassed. The more important a person is, the more embarrassing the situation is going to be. That's when it comes to Boshes. And the Mishnah continues, Pagam, when it comes to paying for the loss of value, we evaluate as if she would be a maidservant being sold on the marketplace. How much was she worth before she had the relations, before the rape happened, and how much is she worth now? Rashi over here says, the Gemara will explain why her value goes down because of this act of relations. And Kanas, the Mishnah says, when it comes to the fine, Shava b'chol adam, that's the same by all people. It doesn't matter who the individuals are. B'chol sheyesh lo kitzvah, anything that has a set amount, min ha-Torah, from the Torah, Shava b'chol adam, that's going to be equal by all people. And the Gemara says, why don't we just say, the Torah says it's 50 selah when it comes to situations of onus of rape, and why don't we say in all situations that's what you pay? Why do we say that there's this boshes payment that varies based on the person? And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Zeir says, Yomer, because then people will say, Baal bas malachim chamishim, Baal bas hadyotas chamishim. What if you have relations with a daughter of kings, it's 50, and if you have relations with a daughter of simple people, it's also 50. It doesn't make sense. There has to be some kind of distinction. Rashi says, Yomer v'heichanu chiluk shebeneim. There's no distinction. Eitzel boshes hilkach yoy boshes. It has to be that you pay a boshes payment because there is a distinction in terms of what was done. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abai. So Abai said back to him, Ihachi, if so, if you're going to say that logic, Gabe Eved Nami, what about by a situation of an Eved as well? There's a halacha, let's say a person's Eved is gored by an ox. So the Torah says a set amount you have to pay for the Eved that was lost, 30 shkolim. Yomru Eved Nokev Margolios Shaloshim Eved Osa. People are going to say that if you have a slave who pierces pearls, which is a much higher level of work, that's 30. And also if you have a slave who does a much lower level of work, it's exactly the same. But we don't make that argument. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Amud Beis.